Hello there and welcome to the Card Grotto. Today I'm colouring on grey toned paper using coloured pencils. So I'm going to start off by stamping my image. This is the Hero Arts and Gina K Friendship Blooms stamp set. There's a really lovely large floral on that stamp set and I'm going to stamp it onto a tag that I've cut from grey paper using the Hero Arts nesting tag dies. So I'm just going to place my image where I want it to be. This obviously is a really large image, but I thought it would look quite nice hanging off of the edge of the tag here. I'm just going to make sure that there's enough space at the top right hand corner for me to stamp my sentiment. And then once I'm happy with the placement, I'm going to press down the lid of the MISTI and then I can stamp that down onto the tag. I'm going to ink up the image with Memento Tuxedo black ink. At this point I'm not really concerned with what ink I'm using. I don't need a really great impression because I'm going to restamp it after I've coloured in the image. I just want to make sure that the ink is going to be suitable to use with coloured pencils, and pretty much most inks are, unless you use mineral spirits with them and then they could smear. But this one is fine. So the grey paper that I'm using today is the Arteza grey toned sketch pad. This is £81 paper, or I think that's 120 GSM. It is fairly thin paper, but if you want to use it in card making, it's quite good to kind of layer it up with cardstock behind. It works really nicely for coloured pencils. So I'm just going to share here my little experiment. So I wanted to see what the colours actually look like on the grey paper. What's really nice with any kind of coloured cardstock that you're using with colour pencils is that the white is kind of more opaque basically, so you're going to see the white pencil and you can use that to your advantage. So the green there is a bit darker than what you would if you were to colour it onto white paper, but what you can do is add a layer of white pencil underneath and then add the colour pencil over the top, and as you can see there's quite a bit of a difference between those two shades, and that's quite good, and you can use it to your advantage if you don't actually have that many shades of coloured pencil, so that you can get some more vibrant looks and different shades of the same colour. So for my colouring today I'm using the Arteza coloured pencils, and I do have a review of these on my channel and I will link to that in the top right hand corner and at the end of the video as well. So let's get colouring. I'm going to use some blue shades for the petals here for the flowers. So I'm going to go in with my darkest shade first, and this is the indigo, and I'm just adding this into the areas where I want it to be darkest. I'm not too concerned with the light source or anything like that. I just want it to look nice at the end. So I'm adding most of the darkest shade kind of where the petals meet each other and more in towards the middle of the flower. And then I'm going to go in with my mid-tone shade here, and this is the Aegean blue. So just going over what I've already coloured in and then bringing that colour out more towards the edge of the petal. And then I can go in with my lightest shade, which is the Robin's Egg blue. And then I'm going to go in with the white pencil, and I'm just going to add in any of the colour that is left from the image, so right at the edge of the petal. And then I do go back over with the blue just to kind of mute that a little bit. So although it's going to end up being a lighter shade because we added that white underneath, I haven't got like a really stark white. And although stark white does look really nice on images with colour pencils, especially on coloured cardstock, I just wanted it to be a bit of a lighter colour than the lightest shade of blue that I used. So now I'm going back in and just doing exactly the same thing, just adding in another layer. This time I'm pressing a bit harder onto the paper. The paper's got a really nice tooth to it, and so it works quite nicely with coloured pencils, and I do find that you can get a lot more layers and things like that using coloured pencils when you use a paper that has some tooth to it. But the thing with having tooth to your paper is that you do see some of the kind of colour it doesn't go all the way into the kind of dips and the valleys in the paper, and so you do see the texture of the coloured pencil. Personally, I'm okay with that. I'm quite happy to see the texture of the coloured pencil. I don't want it to be completely blended out. If I did want that, I could use mineral spirits to blend it out, but like I said, I quite like the look. just something a bit different than, say, like alcohol markers or something like that. So now I'm going in, just adding in my darkest shades and the mid-tone, going back in with all of the different petals here on this flower. I do apologise that my camera is shaking a little bit. I tried out a new setup for colouring, this portion of the colouring. I do struggle sometimes to be able to see what I'm doing, and so I moved the camera closer, but it is kind of shaking a little bit. That's why I've sped this video up so much, so I do apologise for that, but hopefully you can still see what I'm doing. I was kindly sent this paper from Arteza to try out, and I do really like it. Like I said, it works really nicely with especially these Arteza coloured pencils. I think that they work really quite nicely together. So next I'm going to colour in the leaves here, and again I'm using 3 shades of green and then the white as well. So my darkest shade here is the emerald, and then I go in with the basil and blend that out, and then my lightest shade is the matcha. And then again I'm going in with that white pencil, just adding in that on the tips of the leaves, and then going back over a bit with the lightest shade. And then again I'm doing 2 layers of this. And I do like how it turned out, the colouring it against the grey paper. And then once I'd finished colouring it in the image, I'm going around the image with a W1 Copic marker. This paper is kind of like a warm toned grey, which is quite nice. And this Copic marker works really well with this shade. So it's going on a bit darker than it will actually eventually look in the finished tag. It does dry a bit lighter, but I think it just gives a nice shadow, helps to make the image pop. Once the colouring was finished, I stamped the image again. So I'm adding the tag back into the MISTI here, and I'm going to re-stamp that. Like I said, I wasn't too concerned with the impression that I got on the first go, and so I'm going to re-stamp it here with Versafine Clair ink, and this is a really dark kind of pigment ink, and I'm just going to get a bolder impression of the image. When colouring with colour pencils, quite often you kind of lose some of the black lines because the pencils are opaque. And so it works out quite nicely that you can just re-stamp it. Quite often I go over with a fine liner, but if you have a stamping tool, you can stamp again quite easily. I originally thought that I would stamp the sentiment that said "Hello sweet friend," but at the last minute I changed my mind and I'm using the sentiment that says "You are so lovely." Thankfully both of those actually fitted in that space there on the top right hand corner. So I've just stamped that with the same Versafine Clair ink. Now I have cut another tag from some white cardstock. I'm going to use this to back the other tag, the image tag with the grey paper. Like I said, the paper is really quite thin, but this works in 2 ways. One way, it gives it some stability because the paper is against the cardstock, but it also works out quite nicely because the back is nice and clean, and then I can write a sentiment on that. I'm going to add some twine in through the top of the tag, so I'm just using some hemp twine for that. I like to often make bows on the tops of my tags, so I'm just doing that here. Just fiddling around. Sometimes it takes a while to get the bow how I want it to. Other times it works really quite quickly. So now I'm going to finish off the tag with some Iridescent Jewels from Lucy's Cards. So I'm just adding some dabs of multi-medium matte glue here, and I'm going to add the jewels with the jewel picker. So just picking them up and adding them on. I think it just finishes it off nicely. And that's the tag finished for today. I hope you've enjoyed watching. Links to the products that I shared will be in the description bar on YouTube and also over on my blog. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.